$500 for a mailbox. Not a broken one, not a dangerous one, just one that tilted slightly after a storm. The letter came on a Thursday. You are in violation of HOA Code 7.3.1 regarding mailbox alignment. A fine of $500 has been assessed to your account. No warning, no prior notice. Just a bill, a threat of escalation, and a deadline. I stared at the envelope like it had personally insulted me. After living quietly in my new home for just 3 months, this was the first real contact I'd had with the HOA. Apparently, it came in the form of a financial slap. I figured it had to be a mistake, so I went to the source. The HOA office was in a low 2-story brick building behind the community tennis courts. Inside, I was greeted by soft music, the smell of fake lavender, and a receptionist who looked up at me like I'd tracked mud across the floor. "I'm here about a mailbox fine," I said, holding the letter. From the back, a voice cut in before she could answer. "Name?" A woman emerged from behind a frosted glass door, tall, perfect posture, heels that clicked with purpose. Her blonde bob didn't move. Her eyes scanned me like I was a stain on her schedule. "Linda Greaves, I'm the president." I introduced myself and showed her the notice. She barely glanced at it. "Your mailbox is crooked. It's an eyesore," she said, like the matter was closed. "It shifted after the last rainstorm. I've already straightened it." She offered a thin-lipped smile. "Too late. Photos were taken. The fine stands. Pay by the 15th or it escalates." "I'd like to appeal it." She looked amused. "You can submit a request to be added to next month's board meeting. But unless you have evidence the mailbox didn't violate standards at the time of inspection, there's not much point. We follow strict guidelines for a reason. If we let one thing slide, everything goes." I left without saying more. My hands shook with restrained rage. A mailbox, a $500 penalty, and a woman who ran a community like it was her private empire. That weekend, I attended the HOA board meeting. It was held in a sterile room with folding chairs and a PowerPoint clicker that Linda wielded like a weapon. When it was my turn, I calmly presented photos of my mailbox. I explained the weather, the prompt correction, the absurdity of the fine. Linda interrupted me mid-sentence. "Sir, we've already reviewed your appeal. The board has decided the fine is valid. Any further resistance will be considered a failure to comply and result in additional action, including lien placement." I blinked. "Wait, you already voted? Without hearing me speak?" "We followed procedure," she said with a smug tilt of her head. "And we encourage homeowners to maintain better vigilance. We all have responsibilities here." That room, those people, they weren't listening. They were smiling politely while rubber stamping punishments. Linda made a point to thank everyone who supports maintaining our beautiful standards. She looked at me when she said it. After the meeting, I stood outside while the board members filed out. "Looks like you'll need to upgrade to a titanium mailbox," someone joked as he passed me. I didn't laugh. I was too busy watching Linda climb into her luxury SUV, parked diagonally across 2 visitor spots. No ticket, no warning, no accountability. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't about a mailbox, it was about control, about one woman who had turned community rules into her own playbook. So I made a decision. I'd pay the fine, I'd play the game. But I wasn't going to forget what happened. And I sure as hell wasn't going to play by her rules forever. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below if you've ever been targeted by an HOA Karen. Trust me, you're not alone. The Monday after I paid the fine, I found another notice in my mailbox. Violation, garbage bin left visible from the street. Fine, $100. It was a lie. I'd brought the bin in the night before, same as every week. But the photos stapled to the letter showed it at the curb, taken in broad daylight, meaning someone had dragged it out after I'd put it away, snapped the picture, and filed the report. I checked my security footage. It was Linda. At 9:47 a.m., dressed in pastel gym clothes and aviator sunglasses, she casually strolled up my driveway, pulled the bin out with one hand like she was straightening a flower pot, and took the photo with her phone. Then she wheeled it back into view of the camera and walked off. My stomach twisted. She was manufacturing violations, setting traps. This wasn't pettiness anymore. It was predatory. That night, I installed 2 more cameras, one on the side yard facing the street, another on the garage. I updated my system to send immediate phone alerts for motion. Then I printed out a sign, property monitored 24/7, all activity recorded. The next violation came on Thursday. Violation, lawn exceeds height standard by 1.5 inches. Fine, $150. This time the photo didn't even show my yard. It was a close-up of a weed near the fence line, something that hadn't been there 2 days earlier. When I checked my footage, there she was again. 6:32 a.m., wearing garden gloves, bending down near my fence. Her own shadow caught clearly as she tucked something green between the grass. The next day, I caught her talking to a neighbor at the end of the block. She was smiling, laughing. I waited until she left, then walked over. "Hey," I said. "Sorry to bother you. I saw Linda talking with you. Everything okay?" The neighbor, a quiet man in his late 50s, nodded awkwardly. "Yeah, she's around a lot." "She ever mentioned mailbox violations? Lawn height?" He hesitated, then gave a bitter smile. "Last year, she fined me for a bird bath. Said it wasn't within the visual tone of the neighborhood." I fought it. Next month, I got 3 citations in a row. Eventually, I just paid. Cheaper than stress. I asked if he ever attended HOA meetings. He shook his head. "They don't care what we say. Linda runs the board. Always has." That night, I poured myself a drink and stared at the glowing monitor of my laptop. I opened the HOA's website. Under the About Us tab, I found something odd. The HOA didn't own the building it operated from. It leased it from a private holding company. I searched the company's name. Barebones LLC. No website. Registered in a neighboring city. I traced the property records through the county clerk's site. Then I froze. The building's current lease was set to expire in 6 months. And the company that owned it? It had been bought by a local real estate broker 2 years ago. I called an old friend of mine, Evan, who worked in commercial property consulting. I gave him the name of the building and asked him to dig. "Barebones LLC?" he said. "Yeah, they've got a few properties." "Why?" "I'm thinking of making an offer." He whistled. "You'd have to move fast. These things don't sit on the market." I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. The HOA had no permanent headquarters, just a lease, meaning if I could buy the building, I could become their landlord. And maybe, just maybe, I could finally turn the tables. The next morning, I met with a real estate attorney. I asked him one question. "Is it possible to buy the HOA building anonymously?" He smiled. "With the right paperwork? Absolutely." We moved quickly. By Wednesday, my attorney had formed a holding company under a new name, Sandpiper Holdings, LLC. We structured it as a blind trust, with no public ties to me. Through a third-party broker Evan recommended, we submitted an offer on the property, full cash, no contingencies, with a 14-day close. The seller didn't blink. Apparently, he was planning to retire to Arizona and was eager to offload the hassle of small commercial real estate. On the surface, it looked like a standard local investment firm picking up a low-risk asset. Behind the scenes, I was preparing for a move most people in my position would never think to make. Linda had used rules, paper, and power. I was going to use the one thing she never expected someone like me to wield: ownership. While the paperwork moved forward, I stayed quiet. Let her think I was sulking in defeat over the mailbox, the weeds, the garbage bin. I paid each fine, not without protest, but without escalation. On the surface, I was becoming compliant, obedient. Beneath that surface, I was gathering. I spent my evenings documenting every interaction with her. I took screenshots of every letter, archived every motion notification from my security system. I began recording HOA meetings on my phone, catching her statements and instructions. Subtle, veiled threats, but threats nonetheless. 2 weeks later, the building sale closed. I now owned the office space used by the HOA. It was surreal. I sat in the back seat of Evan's car outside the property, watching as Linda parked her silver Lexus in the same diagonal manner, stepping out with her clipboard and her sense of invincibility. She had no idea she was walking into a space she no longer had permission to occupy. But I didn't act right away. I needed the right moment. Instead, I focused on understanding the lease agreement between the HOA and the previous owner. My attorney walked me through the fine print. The lease renewal was optional and required reapproval by the new owner. There were clauses tied to code of conduct, use of space, and, critically, termination grounds in cases of documented harassment or unethical activity. I had the grounds. I just needed the scene. That scene came sooner than expected. Late Friday evening, while checking my mailbox, I found another notice. This time it wasn't even typed. Just a handwritten note taped directly onto my door. Your vehicle leaks oil. Driveway staining is a violation. Consider this your warning. That was it. No letterhead. No signature. Just a note scribbled with a permanent marker, stuck right over my doorbell camera. The footage showed Linda herself pinning it up, smirking at the camera before turning and walking away. She was brazen, careless, and finally arrogant enough to be caught in her own trap. The following Monday, I requested a meeting with the HOA board to discuss a matter of property ownership. Linda set it for Thursday evening in the very building I now owned. I arrived last, dressed in a button-down and blazer, carrying a single folder and a calm expression. Linda greeted me with the same icy smile she always wore for residents she considered beneath her. Glad to see you finally decided to get involved constructively, she said. I sat across from her. You could say that. The board members filtered in, 5 total, including Linda, none of whom realized what was about to happen. I waited until the meeting officially started, waited until Linda called for new business, then stood. I'm here to inform the HOA that as of 2 weeks ago, the building you are currently operating from is under new ownership. Murmurs, puzzled glances. Linda frowned. And why is that relevant? Because I'm the new owner. The silence that followed could have cracked concrete. Linda's face lost its color. The board president, the enforcer, the queen of the neighborhood, had just been informed she was now my tenant. And, I continued, after reviewing several documented incidents of targeted harassment, including falsified violations and unauthorized entry onto private property, I am exercising Clause 4.2b of your lease agreement. Linda's voice trembled. Which is termination of lease for unethical conduct that endangers community trust and tenant relations. You have 30 days to vacate. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The board members stared at her. One of them muttered, "Is this real?" I handed them each a packet, security footage stills, letters, timestamps, and a certified notice of lease termination. This wasn't a power play, it was accountability. Linda didn't speak for a full 5 seconds. Then, like a glitch in a computer program, she snapped into action. This is outrageous, she said, voice shaking with manufactured indignation. You can't evict a nonprofit community organization. We represent the homeowners. This space belongs to the people. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The building was privately owned. You rented it. I now own it. And I have every legal right to terminate the lease, especially with evidence of misconduct. She turned to the others, looking for support, but none of the board members said a word. They were staring at the documents I'd handed them. The photos of her placing fake violations, the transcripts from HOA meetings, where she dismissed appeals before hearing them, the letter she taped to my door. There was no defending it. I'll sue, she finally spat, standing. This is a personal vendetta. I kept my voice even. Please do, but I'd advise you to check the clauses you signed first. Your lease was week-to-week pending renewal, and you violated multiple conduct terms. Any court would see this as a landlord protecting their property from a hostile tenant. Her jaw clenched. I could see it then, the realization. She had no leverage. Not anymore. One of the board members, a soft-spoken woman named Teresa, finally spoke. I'm sorry, but this is too much. Linda, we've had complaints for months. Maybe it's time for a leadership change. Linda's eyes darted around the room, searching for loyalty. Finding none. You'll regret this, she whispered, directing it at me as if it were a promise. Then she gathered her binder and stormed out of the room. I waited a moment, then turned to the others. I'm not here to destroy the HOA. I want to help fix it. These fines, the bullying, it has to stop. We need transparency, fairness, respect. No one disagreed. By the end of the meeting, the board had agreed to suspend all pending violation reviews. They scheduled a vote for new leadership. Teresa volunteered to serve as interim president until a proper election could be held. As for the building, I gave them a choice. vacate in 30 days, or negotiate a new lease under one condition. Linda Greaves could never return in any official capacity. They didn't hesitate. The next morning, I found no violation letter in my mailbox for the first time in weeks. No new notes, no passive-aggressive emails. Instead, I found a card slipped into the crack of my door. No envelope. Just a folded piece of stationery that read, "You did what we all were too afraid to try. Thank you." No signature. Over the next week, I was approached by neighbors I barely knew. People who had lived in fear of arbitrary rules and surprise fines. One woman admitted she'd once been cited for a curtain color inconsistency visible through her second-story window. Another man told me he'd been fined for hosting a barbecue with non-conforming lighting. Stories poured in, quiet voices now emboldened. And Linda? She disappeared. Rumor had it she tried to petition the county to challenge the lease termination. But once the legal paperwork surfaced, and with my attorney ready to counter every move, the effort fizzled. Within 2 weeks, the HOA officially announced her resignation. By week 3, the locks were changed on the building. I walked through the now empty office on a sunny Wednesday, the echo of my steps filling the space that once housed her throne. Where intimidation once ruled, now there was silence. Not victory, just peace. The kind that comes when a tyrant finally runs out of places to hide. A month later, the HOA building had a new sign. Community Resource Center, Residents First. It wasn't just cosmetic. Inside, they'd removed Linda's glass-encased president's wall and replaced it with a simple whiteboard outlining open agenda items, resident concerns, and volunteer events. A neighbor-run garden club had already requested the conference room for weekend meetups. And me? I never planned to be involved in neighborhood politics. But after what I'd seen, I couldn't go back to staying quiet. I joined the finance committee, not for control, but to make sure no one else would be blindsided the way I was. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee as a kid on a scooter zipped past. The mailbox, the same one that started all of this, stood perfectly straight, with fresh paint and a small planter at its base. I hadn't touched it since that first violation. I left the planter as a reminder. Amanda, one of the board members who had voted to oust Linda, stopped by holding a clipboard and a cautious smile. "We're drafting new rule amendments. Less about cosmetic nonsense, more about safety, shared spaces, that sort of thing. You interested?" "Only if we make it illegal to measure grass with a ruler?" I joked. She laughed, then turned serious. "You change things around here. For the better." I shrugged. "I just bought a building." "No," she said. "You bought time. For the rest of us to remember we still had a voice." That night, while going through old emails, I found one from a neighbor I hadn't heard from in weeks. It was a link to a local blog. Headline: HOA President Steps Down After Lease. Power Play Exposes Abuse. It detailed everything: Linda's reign, the abrupt loss of the headquarters, and the rise of a homeowner who fought back with his wallet and his wits. I scrolled through the comments. Dozens from locals, nearby neighborhoods, even a few from out of state. One read, "My HOA once fined me for improper curtain closure. Wish I had the guts to do what this guy did." Another, "How do I buy our HOA's building? Asking for a friend." And then buried at the bottom from an anonymous user, "I was on the board. I stayed quiet. I'm sorry." I leaned back, letting the words settle. It hadn't been about revenge. It had been about reclaiming dignity, about showing people like Linda that you can't weaponize rules against those who know how to read them better than you. A week later, a for sale sign popped up in front of a familiar property. Linda's house. She left quietly. No goodbye letters. No farewell barbecue. Just a moving van, one early morning, and a last glimpse of her face behind the tinted window of her SUV. No eye contact, no final word. I watched her drive away, turned, and walked back to my porch. The neighborhood felt lighter, and the mailbox still standing, straighter than ever.